It's pretty surreal. Baldur's Gate 3, it exists, it's here. At least the early access version. But while a lot of people are enjoying the game, there are a number of people who've raised some concerns. The question is though, are those concerns valid, or are they teething issues from people who might not have played a D&D game before, or even an early access game before? So this isn't a negative video, because I'm going to actually be debunking a lot of those criticisms, and I'm also going to be constructive with some of the ones that I think are maybe valid, and that's because I want Baldur's Gate 3 to be the very best game it can be. I'm really enjoying it. So let's jump in and talk about these criticisms. Hi, Estelden here. I want to say firstly that I'm loving this game and I'm enjoying so many different aspects of it. I haven't gotten far enough in yet as to where I feel I can give my full thoughts constructively, but that'll be coming over the next few days. And if you love RPGs and you're a little bit turned off by some of the dumbing down of the modern industry, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. I'm doing 4 videos a week about RPGs and other related topics, so yeah, please stick around if you like the content. So most people are loving Baldur's Gate 3, and I think it's reminding a lot of people of early Baldur's Gate 1, where you're wandering around the world, you're doing little quests as you get through those early levels. There's so much to like there. However, when a new game comes out with so much anticipation, a ton of hype gets thrown its way. Think back to Fallout 4, Dragon Age Inquisition. Those were highly revered games on release that later on had a bit of a shift and fans started to realise they were quite underwhelming. For that reason, I want to make sure criticisms of Baldur's Gate 3 are heard rather than ignored. But that also means addressing them, because some of them might be valid, sure, but some of it might not. I want this game to be absolutely incredible when it gets its official release, so making sure that Larian hear fair criticism and not just nonsense should hopefully ensure the best result for everyone. I've been reading a lot of people's thoughts on the game, and I do believe that the core audiences of gamers playing it are old school Baldur's Gate fans, current D&D fans who might not really play a lot of video games normally, and then also Divinity fans who don't really care for Baldur's Gate as a series, they just wanted a new Larian game, they didn't really care what it was. And lastly, you've got the people who like all these games that don't really sit on any particular side of the fence. So in saying that, where the audiences lean is probably going to play a part in the criticism going around. And when it comes to criticism, I want to start off with a big one, because I think that some people don't understand what early access is. Larian have talked about the sales for this title being fantastic, they were absolutely shocked at the response. That might seem like a great thing, but there's two sides to that coin. On the shiny side, it means sales are good, interest is absolutely there, and it's probably already a commercial success. The game is being streamed all over the internet, there's plenty of good word of mouth, and I think it's safe to say that Larian have got a hit on their hands. The problem is, a lot of people who bought it have never played an early access title before. And I do think a lot of them would have paid full price, they thought they'd be getting a completely polished, finished first act with the rest of the game coming next year, and that is not what this is. This is like a beta for an MMO, you get in early and you are going to have to deal with some jank. My experience with it was I went to launch the game and it crashed, I couldn't get in, I had to do a little bit of troubleshooting just to get the game started. I had a lot of issues with the camera, everything was a little bit rough, but was I annoyed? Of course not. It's week 1 of early access, this is exactly what I was expecting, but I think it was a bit of a shock for many people. So because of all this, I have seen a lot of odd criticisms going around the internet. There's people who are complaining about classes being missing, appearance customization being limited, and also things like facial expressions and just how your character kind of acts in a cutscene not really being quite polished and looking a bit silly. I don't want to make any promises on behalf of Larian, but I do believe that they're going to be fixing all of that. They've already confirmed that we don't have all of the classes that are going to be in the game, we're just getting a small serving of them to kind of get us going. And I also think that character appearance customization is probably not at the top of the list when it comes to getting early access into players' hands. I imagine most of their focus this early on just goes into making sure the core content is working as intended. And as time goes on, you're going to see more classes, you're going to have more options to customize your character's appearance. And I'm glad those are their priorities, because from a gameplay standpoint, it's all playing fine, the game plays beautifully. So I think at the end of the day, early access may have been a mixed bag, because first impressions, they absolutely matter. And when you've got a game like this that has got far more mainstream potential than Divinity Original Sin 2's early access, Larian are going to have to accept that releasing an early build means you're going to have a lot of people who buy it and act disappointed because it's not finished. Larian can talk about it as much as they want on Facebook, they can do press releases, community updates, and they can explain that, hey, this isn't finished, don't expect a finished product. But most gamers, most of those casual players, they're not going to do any reading on this stuff, so they're just going to see like their favourite streamer playing it, or they might see it on Steam, they'll see it in the brand new section and think, oh cool, Baldur's Gate 3, I'm going to go and check it out. And then they're going to give their thoughts. And a lot of those sorts of people, they don't care that it's not finished. They're not going to excuse the bugs and the jank. They're just going to say, hey, I paid full price for this. Where's my completed game? Obviously, that's not the majority, but I still see a lot of those comments going around. I don't think it's a really fair criticism for Larian. Again, I don't think this game's perfect. I think it does have some problems that need to be addressed, but I don't see this as being one of them. This is like pre-ordering, but they give you like a playable demo beforehand. The actual game, it's not coming out till next year, I think. So some people do need to keep that in mind. The combat style is another that I'm hearing a lot about, and the loudest negative voice here, it does come from Baldur's Gate purists who are quite annoyed that real-time with pause combat isn't in this, and as such, they don't really consider this Baldur's Gate. Now, I'm pretty neutral on this issue because I absolutely love Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, they're fantastic games, but I also really enjoy what Larian does, so I'm absolutely open to what they're doing, and I'm open to some of their changes, as long as they get it right and they still respect the legacy of the BioWare games. Now, classic Baldur's Gate fans have been talking about this for a little while, so it's not a new issue, but now that the game's actually out and people can play it, it is being talked about a lot more. A solution being thrown around is that Larian should do what Obsidian have done with Pillars of Eternity 2 and offer both combat modes. In a perfect world, I'd love them to be able to do that and please everyone, but the problem is this game has been developed with selling Dungeons & Dragons as a tabletop game in mind. Wizards of the Coast want to present this as the flagship D&D game, so it's not just about building up Larian's reputation or building up the Baldur's Gate brand. For that reason, I can't see a world where they implement real-time with pause, because they're not going to be able to sell the turn-based nature of D&D quite predominantly, because I think if both options were there, a lot of casual players would pick the real-time option because it sounds more action-focused. So the people who want real-time with pause, I completely understand your concerns, I get where you're coming from, I just don't think it's going to happen. But the good news is, Pathfinder 2, it's going to come out eventually, it's in development, there's plenty of updates going around, and that should hopefully give people their fix in the real-time department. On a related note, the turn-based combat itself has been another hot topic of discussion for many people. You would think with how great the combat in the Divinity games were, this would be a point of no contention, everyone would just absolutely love it, but I found that that hasn't been the case. Now again, this noise comes from a certain perspective of the community, so this is people who love Larian games, but they're not so much into Baldur's Gate or D&D, so for them, it's probably going to take some adjusting because the Dungeons & Dragons combat system, at least in the game, is a little bit slower than what you might expect with Divinity. I do think that the different rule set has left them a little bit confused, and the reason for that is in Divinity you had ability points, which would often let you make multiple attacks in the same turn, and that could lead to you making short work of enemies some of the time. In Baldur's Gate 3, it works a little bit differently because you only get one specific action per turn. This means a lot of the time, even if you're pressed up against an enemy, you're only going to be allowed one attack. And I do want to clarify by saying that's not always the case, because you also get a special ability, which can also deal damage, but a lot of new players getting into the game, they'll probably just be attacking once, and they'll be having a slower time, and maybe just getting a little bit frustrated. So I have seen some Divinity fans raise concern, but I do think that'll change a little bit as those people reach higher levels, because they'll start to see some of the complexities of things like the magic system, and all these different classes, so that depth that they're expecting, that is going to come later, and it will likely solve a lot of those problems. So the reason I point out that criticism is not because anything's wrong with the combat. I've seen a lot of feedback and most people think it's fantastic. It's more about people who are new to it, kind of adjusting, understanding that these are different rules, and I think once they kind of accept that, they'll have a much better time with it. Character leveling is something I've seen talked about a lot as well. Now, I'll say that I'm not a huge Dungeons & Dragons person myself, and what I mean by that is I've just never really had friends interested in it. Some of them might love video games, sure, but if I suggested that we all sit around the campfire and make our own little RPG, they're probably going to tell me to get lost. That means that most of my RPG experience comes from video games, and I would say that the vast majority of Baldur's Gate players will be in the same boat and they won't have really played a lot of D&D on paper. So if that's you and you haven't played a lot of D&D, you might be in for a little bit of a shock when you get to the character level up screen. In Fallout New Vegas, you're picking all these skills. You might pick a perk. In the recent Wasteland 3, it was quite similar. You'd be leveling up. It was a great big event. And you had all these thoughts about building your character and specializing in different skills. It's always a great time. Baldur's Gate 3 in the 5th edition of D&D though, you're pretty much just going to press the OK button, for the most part at least. Now this changes a bit later on, sure, but most new players jumping into the game are simply going to be pressing that OK button when they level up the first few times with their characters. It's been a little bit jarring for some people who don't know the rule set, and I do think Larian might want to consider adding just a few more screens to the level up window. Perhaps hyping it up a little bit more when you learn new skills and you get a HP boost. And look, it's not a huge issue, but it's just something that might please people who are used to different sorts of RPGs in the video game market. I'll stress again that most people are loving the game for the most part, and these are not issues causing people to hate the game or anything. It's more that people are just getting used to new systems and perhaps just adjusting to Larian's changing direction with this new Dungeons & Dragons partnership. What I think is super important though is that those with early access should be critiquing this game a lot. We can be proud of Larian for coming out with something that's clearly going to be a great role-playing game, absolutely, but keeping in mind that this is early access, and the whole point of early access is not just so they can take our money early, but so we can provide feedback that they can use to improve the game. Some of those areas are of course obvious, and while I'm not a big graphics guy, the facial animations, obviously they do look a bit stupid, especially in cutscenes, but I don't think that's important feedback to give them. They know that, they're going to be fixing those over the next 12 months or so. The more important areas for me are content, choice and consequence, along with of course the narrative, because those are the areas for me that I feel are going to make or break the game, and I think they will for many other people too. They might have implemented a solid D&D system, but that side of the property belongs to Wizards of the Coast, and if the story is boring or the characters aren't engaging enough, then the game isn't going to be all that memorable. I think the whole intro on the ship where it crashes and you start exploring the forest, that's all really cool. I think it works. Like I mentioned, I think it brings back that Baldur's Gate 1 feeling where you slowly build up your character while doing those smaller tasks around the map before building up to much bigger and grander threats, and if they're going to pace it that way, I think it's going to really work. Giving feedback on all of that as it happens though is paramount. If there's a companion you're just not feeling, or if you think the direction of the story is a little bit off, I think it needs to be talked about and discussed. Perhaps there's a quest that feels like it doesn't really give enough player agency or choice, and I think quests like that should be addressed as well. We should note them down, present them in the community, see what people think, and pass that feedback back onto Larian. This is the time to be doing that, and I think it's better if we work together, rather than going, oh, that person's an elitist purist, he only wants old Baldur's Gate, I'm not going to listen to him, the game's perfect, Larian are fantastic. I don't think that's the best attitude. I think it's much better if everyone comes together as a community and finds the things that aren't quite working in the RPG space. So that also comes with being constructive and keeping an open mind with Larian's take on the series. Now, if you just don't like the game, it's not for you, completely fine. There's plenty of other great RPGs that are up and coming. I'm just talking about if you're someone who does like the game, but you want it to get better. I want Larian to absolutely knock this out of the park, so I'm going to be playing as much as I can over the next few days. I'm going to give my full thoughts, probably in 2 or 3 days' time, and I'm also going to keep up to date on everyone's critiques to see where the greater community is landing on this title, especially as time goes on and new updates are added to early access. Also, I've saved this for last, and it's not a big issue, but I do think one lacking area of the game, at least for me, has been the music. I know it's subjective, and it could be that the tunes just haven't been finalised yet, but I really feel that it's lacking compared to the Divinity games, so I hope it's just a matter of it not being finished, and that this is it, because old Baldur's Gate, Divinity, I think they had much better OSTs, so hopefully there's better to come, because I'm loving so many different elements of the game aside from that. It's fantastic. Again, this isn't meant to be a negative video, it's more about addressing all the main criticisms that are going around, and I feel some of them, like early access issues such as jank, character models, I don't think that's important feedback for Larian, because they're obviously going to fix that. This is a huge game, massive budget, obviously they're going to want to get the presentation spot on for the game's release. For me, it's more about using this time to make sure they get the core elements right, and that very much means the characters, the plot, the direction, and I really hope that they put the city of Baldur's Gate in early access at some point, even if it's in 6-7 months from now, just so we can gauge it, and fans of the originals, they can kind of see if Larian are doing a good job with towns, because I don't think they've had that experience so much. They've had settlements, villages in other games, but nothing to the level of what a Baldur's Gate city should be. For me, when it came to this video, it was about trying something new. I thought to myself, oh man, I can make like an early impressions video, but there's so many of them out there for every single game that releases. I don't think it's really going to be good or interesting content to anyone, because you've seen it before. There's a million early impressions going around. I feel it would hopefully be something a bit more unique for you guys to see the criticisms, see the concern around the community, but rather than me just like hammer them home, yeah, look, there's issues here, I want to tell you about them, I'm going to be really negative. It was more about trying to be kind of objective, so every everyone can see them and kind of make a call for themselves if you feel they're relevant to you, or if you think they're just kind of silly. And I think some of them are kind of stupid, but at least you got an idea of the different sides of the fence. So my extended thoughts on the game will be coming in the next few days. That'll be a little bit more like a review, but I'm going to dive in a bit deeper. So it won't be about just the basic things like how does the combat work. I mean, most people probably know that by now. It's going to be more about addressing the narrative, addressing the characters and some of the thoughts there. So I can't wait to do that, and yeah, hopefully some of you guys will check that out as well. So hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.